the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni lawsuit isn't adding up for me. Hello everyone, and welcome back to The Chanel. A couple videos ago, I talked about Blake Lively and some of her past controversies. And to be honest, I was a little bit surprised with some of the criticism I received on that video. And listen, I know that whatever I post on the internet is fair game for criticism. And I actually really appreciate what some of you said because it helped me better understand how other people viewed this lawsuit. And I was sitting here in my bubble, and frankly, I really did think that a lot of people saw the lawsuit in the same way that I did. And that was flawed thinking on my end. So I took the time to view some videos from some channels that you all mentioned in my last Blake Lively video, and it really helped me understand a different perspective. However, my opinion stays still relatively the same as it was while I was recording my first video about Blake Lively, because I think that some of the counter arguments are a little bit oversimplified. I understand the sentiment behind these arguments, but I thought we could spend some time going over these arguments and why I do think that they are an oversimplification of the issue at hand. As I said before, I am a feminist. Women are often discredited, scrutinized unfairly, and re-traumatized when they speak up. And that matters to me so much that it's the very reason that I care so deeply and have such strong opinions on this lawsuit, and I feel compelled to share my thoughts. When I read that New York Times article published in December of 2024, I was horrified by some of the allegations, and I believed Blake Lively wholeheartedly and was fully in support of her. However, after reading Blake's original CRD complaint alongside Justin Baldoni's response to it, a lot of things didn't line up for me, and some things seemed to be misrepresented in a way that completely changed the original sentiment, that I started to question Blake's motives. Before we talk about the lawsuit, I think it's important that we understand the subject matter of the film because it's definitely relevant to the backlash that Blake Lively received while marketing the movie. It Ends With Us is a movie adaptation of the novel of the same name, written by Colleen Hoover. The film was directed by Justin Baldoni, who is also the co-founder of the production company in charge of this film, Wayfarer Studios. Justin also plays the lead male role, Ryle Kincaid, and Blake plays the lead female role, Lily Bloom. The film centers on a DV relationship and explores how trauma, DV, and abuse relationships can be very complicated for survivors and isn't as black and white as people would like to believe. The movie follows Lily Bloom, who is a young adult. I believe in the book she's supposed to be early 20s, but in the film they did age her up to be in her late 20s, early 30s. Lily grew up in a very tumultuous household where she often witnessed her father abusing her mother. As a young teen, she meets and falls in love with a boy named Atlas, but Atlas later enlists in the military and they end up losing touch. As an adult, Lily meets Ryle Kincaid, who is a neurosurgeon. They end up dating, but then Lily happens to cross paths with Atlas once again. And Ryle starts to reveal his true colors and his abusive nature through a couple instances where he becomes physically violent towards Lily. The book itself was heavily criticized when it was released, even before the movie drama. A lot of people felt that Ryle was written in such a way that he became a sympathetic character, and many people felt that the book romanticized DV. Now, I've never read the book, however, I am not a huge fan of Colleen Hoover. I have not read any of her books, but some things that she's done, I'm just not a huge fan. But because I haven't read the book, I can't really say my opinions on it, and I don't know how Colleen handled the sensitive subject matter, so in terms of the book, I have no judgment on it. But the movie, I actually thought was pretty effective in getting the message across that DV relationships are extremely complex. Despite the criticism, I actually think it's very powerful that Ryle is a sympathetic character because it helps us understand how a victim may view their abuser and the complex dynamics of a DV relationship. It shows that these relationships are not black and white, and often victims of DV have this trauma bond to their abuser because there are good moments in the relationship. Sometimes they experience denial, sometimes they might even truly love this person, and there are just a lot of complex emotions when it comes to these relationships. So it really explains why people stay when the person who is supposed to love them is also the one who is hurting them deeply. As you can probably tell, the subject matter of this film is very heavy, it's very sensitive, and it requires a careful, empathetic, and thoughtful approach. But at the time of the premiere, the public noticed Blake's out-of-touch marketing of the film. And because of this, Blake started to get a lot of backlash from the public. She marketed the movie as a rom-com, a lighthearted watch, and for many people who had no idea what the premise of the film was about, they were wholly unprepared for what they were actually going to see on the screen. In her promotion, Blake seemed to focus more on her fashion choices, on her alcohol brand, on promoting her husband's film, Deadpool, instead of discussing the topics of DV and how being a victim can feel so complex, and a lot of the time is really difficult to break out of that cycle. One of the biggest criticisms that I had for Blake was her promotion of her alcohol brand in conjunction with this movie. During the after party of the premiere, there were custom cocktails being served that were inspired by and named after the characters. One of these drinks was While You Wait, named after the abuser in the film. Alcohol and substance abuse is very intertwined with DV and is often the cause of a lot of these situations. So to include alcohol and to name a drink after an abusive character was out of touch, to say the least. And not only was she promoting her alcohol brand, Blake was also promoting a new hair care line called Blake Brown. But I will say this promotion of her new hair care line was just an unfortunate coincidence because the line was scheduled to be released in the summer of 2024. While the It Ends With Us movie was scheduled to be released in February, but with the SAG-AFTRA strikes, the film's release date was pushed to August. But the combination of the movie's promotion, as well as Blake's alcohol brand, her hair care line, and her seemingly focusing on her fashion and outfits instead of the content of the film, was met with a lot of public backlash. Many people who were excited to see the film cover these difficult topics and to see a well-loved Hollywood actress speak about these topics and bring attention to them were very disappointed when they saw the film being marketed as more of a rom-com than a commentary on DV and its complexities. And the public social media attention was swift. There were tons of TikToks, social media posts, YouTube commentary videos covering all the marketing surrounding this movie and criticizing Blake for her out-of-touch approach. Meanwhile, the way that Justin was promoting the film was pretty much the complete opposite of what Blake was doing. He centered his marketing approach on the difficult topic of DV and encouraged people to stop blaming victims and instead ask the question, why men act the way that they do? And seeing this stark contrast between Justin's marketing and Blake's marketing hurt Blake's image even more, because here the director is focusing on the topic of the film, while Blake, the lead actress, seems to deflect all of the questions related to DV and these serious topics. As Blake received more backlash, her favorability with the public also declined. Only a week after the film's release, news broke that Justin Baldoni had hired a PR firm called The Agency Group. This PR firm had represented high-profile people like Johnny Depp in his trial against Amber Heard, and hearing that, the public took that as a sign that Justin Baldoni had done something wrong behind the scenes and was trying to get ahead of it before any negative news broke out. And in December of 2024, a bombshell article by the New York Times was published. The headline itself was pretty incriminating for Justin Baldoni, reading, "We can bury anyone inside a Hollywood smear machine." In this article, there were private text messages between Justin Baldoni and his PR team, seemingly scheming to come up with a PR strategy and a smear campaign to tarnish Blake's public image. But then, the original text messages were released, and they showed that significant context was missing in the New York Times article, and that a lot of the things cited in the article were cherry-picked to create a different narrative. It was also revealed that Blake had filed a CRD complaint just the day before that the article was published. Now, that whole story is very complex, and I think that will require a separate video to actually explain everything that happened there with the New York Times article, how they got those private text messages, and how they knew about the CRD complaint and all of its details within one day of it being filed. But there are points that I want to touch on that I think people use to defend Blake that I feel is actually not applicable in this context. Regarding the smear campaign, Blake alleges that Justin Baldoni and his PR team manufactured all the backlash that she was experiencing, but I firmly believe that that backlash was completely organic, because the way that she was marketing the film was wildly out of touch, and no one but Blake is responsible for that. Yes, a lot of people pulled up past interviews and past controversies of Blake's, but I feel like that's par for the course on social media these days, because as soon as someone messes up in the public eye, the internet tends to pull up receipts of past controversies and other ways that you might have messed up. So regardless if Justin was pushing a PR campaign to smear Blake's name, I believe that this backlash would have happened organically, and there is proof to suggest that Justin and his team actually advised Blake to adapt her approach that was more in line with the serious topics of the movie. I also find it very frustrating that any criticism of Blake is quickly labeled as anti-feminist. In fact, I would argue that part of feminism is also holding women accountable when their actions undermine other women. And Blake has a track record for being problematic, racist, insensitive, and dismissive of other women. But don't get me wrong, I believe that people can grow and change. They can learn from their past mistakes and change to become better people. But Blake has never taken accountability for any of the things that she's done. And most importantly to me is her racist actions and her support for known abuse like Harvey Weinstein and Woody Allen. And in my opinion, because she didn't say anything or address these controversies, I have little reason to believe that she has actually changed to be a better person. I do want to emphasize though that just because she had a controversial past, that doesn't mean that she can't also be a victim. Two things can be true at once. Blake may have genuinely felt uncomfortable or violated on the It Ends With Us set, but that does not excuse her from any of the harm that she has perpetuated in the past against women and people of color. And with this, people argue in support of Blake by claiming the myth of the perfect victim. And I agree that a perfect victim doesn't exist and is actually very harmful. Society often expects victims to behave in a very specific and unrealistic way. They should be calm, consistent, emotionally restrained, morally spotless, and essentially be the bigger person. Victims shouldn't behave in ways that the public finds unlikable or dissatisfactory, and if they do, their credibility is immediately questioned. And I agree that that expectation is extremely unfair and completely erases a humanistic lens. Real victims are messy. Trauma affects memory, affects emotion, affects behavior, and because of this, victims might minimize the harm that is being done to them or remember details differently as time passes, or even continue to have relationships with the people that harmed them. And if they act in that way, that does not mean that the harm that they experienced wasn't real. But I actually think the perfect victim argument is misapplied in the context of Blake Lively. And that's purely based on the CRD complaint and the subsequent evidence that was released. My criticism for Blake is not of her emotional response, her likability, or whether she is a flawless, morally pure individual. The reason I have grown suspicious of Blake is because her allegations against Justin Baldoni and other people affiliated with Wayfarer seem to be deliberately misrepresented, and her argument over time has changed, seemingly dropping the sexual harassment claims and moving over to a hostile workplace claim. But the damage has already been done because accusing someone of something so serious as sexual harassment is a career-ending allegation. And the way that the evidence is framed in her complaint seems very deliberate and unfair. And so my wariness is not due to Blake not being the perfect victim, but rather my distrust of the manipulated evidence. Because in my opinion, the way that the evidence in the CRD complaint is written does not read as misremembering details, as the details that were left out were pretty critical to what actually happened. And to me, they feel like deliberate manipulations rather than a victim experiencing memory loss due to trauma or changing their story out of fear of retaliation. I think one of the strongest examples of this mischaracterization is the video that was released by Justin's team showing Blake and Justin filming a slow dance scene for the movie in which the characters Ryle and Lily fall in love. Blake claims that Justin was speaking out of character, he sniffs her neck, and that he says she smells good. but in the actual footage, we see that Blake was actually the first one to speak out of character, directing Justin on how to frame the lighting and suggesting that they talk during this scene because she believes it looks more romantic, even though Justin is the director of this film. And his original vision was to not speak during the scene and instead look into each other's eyes. Blake also fails to mention that something very integral to the story is that Lily has a tattoo on her neck that Ryle is obsessed with. But he doesn't know that Lily actually got this tattoo for Atlas. And when Ryle does find out that the tattoo is for Atlas, this becomes a catalyst to another DV incident that's very important to the story. And then finally, another key thing that Blake leaves out is that she brings up her spray tan, and Justin kind of casually says, "It smells good." And yes, while this comment may have made Blake feel uncomfortable, does it count as sexual harassment? I'm not sure about that. People also compared this lawsuit to the Depp v. Heard lawsuit back in 2022. They compare Blake to Amber and how Amber was completely obliterated by the press and claim that this is the same thing that's happening to Blake. But the issue is the power dynamics. In the Depp v. Heard case, Johnny Depp is an extremely powerful figure in Hollywood, and so his star power definitely had a huge influence on how the public viewed Amber. And while Amber did have some pretty big projects, like her roles in the DC universe, she's nowhere near as powerful as Depp is in Hollywood and definitely has less influence. But Blake, on the other hand, is undoubtedly more powerful than Justin in Hollywood. Her connections include Taylor Swift, her husband Ryan Reynolds, and then Hugh Jackman, as well as Sean Levy. And these are people that are very big in Hollywood. Meanwhile, Justin has definitely not been in projects as big as some of Blake and her social circle have been in. Justin's biggest role is Raphael in Jane the Virgin. And so It Ends With Us is pretty much his first big project since that. So undoubtedly, Blake has more of the power, compounded by her husband's power. So I would actually argue that Justin is probably more comparable to Amber Heard than Blake. And proof of this power dynamic can be seen in the marketing for the movie. Somehow, Blake was able to take over the marketing, lead a lot of the conversations, and have the rest of the cast appear by her side, while ostracizing Justin and pretty much forcing him to do his marketing for the film by himself. And it doesn't make sense to me that the director of the film would choose to do marketing on his own, as optically this would look pretty bad and would indicate to the public that there was something wrong, which I firmly believe is something that the director would want to avoid. So I highly doubt that the solo marketing was his own choice. Something that I find so unnecessary, harmful, and disrespectful is Blake seemingly trying to attack Justin's faith in the Baha'i religion. Justin, along with other members of Wayfarer Productions, including Steve Sarowitz and Jamie Heath, are all part of the Baha'i faith. And Blake seems to claim that they were very pushy about their religion, making the rest of the cast feel uncomfortable. And I just feel like that this is a dirty and uncalled for accusation. And even more because Baha'i is a minority religion, and its members face persecution in its birth country, Iran. And perhaps this is just my own bias, but it's a very gross look to be attacking someone's faith just because it makes you feel uncomfortable. Blake's attacks on the Baha'i religion feel extremely bigoted, and I believe perpetuate the gross rhetoric justifying their persecution and denial of human rights that all dates back to the 1900s. And lastly, this is completely not backed by any evidence, but in my own opinion and in my gut, I cannot trust someone who has been so bigoted for so long and has never apologized or taken accountability for all the things that they've done to perpetuate bigotry. And this is a feeling that I can't exactly explain, and I realize that this might counteract my argument, but for some reason, I just feel like the way that a lot of things are worded in the complaint are extremely critical of the Baha'i faith and seemingly target a Black man, Jamie Heath, very often. From my own assessment of the situation, it really feels like Blake and Ryan took advantage of Justin Baldoni's good nature, his open communication, his commitment to his faith, and his willingness to be open to new ideas, and weaponized this in their favor. I find this case so particularly frustrating because I feel like it sets a dangerous precedent for other victims of SA and SH and the future of how these lawsuits are handled. Because as the days go on, it's looking less and less like Blake Lively was actually experiencing SH and was more likely experiencing discomfort due to her own personal insecurities. But I continue to hope that this case will actually be an important lesson on what feminism is and is not. Anyway, I have tried to record this video so many times already, but somehow I seem to always lose my words when it comes to this topic because I believe so much in women's rights and feminism as a movement, and it upsets me to see someone seemingly taking advantage of someone else's vulnerabilities and then claiming anti-feminist to anyone that criticizes them. Alrighty, well, if you've made it this far and you enjoyed your time here, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Let me know your thoughts on this topic in the comments down below, but just a gentle reminder to please be kind to each other, as I know that this is a very sensitive topic and that people have extremely strong opinions regarding this lawsuit. But anyway, I think it's time for me to sign off. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.